Sit back, it's time to get groovy.
We interrupt this podcast to bring you a news bulletin. So I recently thought it would be really cool if I sent Steve a brand new fancy webcam.
Unfortunately, this led to a Titanic issue in that we set off with brand new equipment and then ran into a problem with syncing.
And because of that, the following episode is going to be pure audio, but hang in there because the next episode
might also be pure audio because we hadn't changed any of the settings yet.
Yeah, he's correct. So I'm the person who does all the editing in our team, and I haven't looked at the files for that recording that we already did, but there's like a 99.9% chance that we're going to be doing an all-audio episode next one as well. However, we are hoping that before the year ends, we'll get this right and we'll be able to have a successful video podcast.
Having toyed with each of the 100 different settings that come with the camera, I think I've fixed the problem, but only time will tell.
Thank you so much, and please enjoy the episode.
Question, do you remember that movie?
Welcome back to Remember That Movie. I am the third Alejandro Rosa on IMDb.
And I am Steve Johnston, and I am not on IMDb.
And we're back with another episode and another movie. This week, this month, this moment, it is Steve who has taken us on a journey. What is the subject matter of this episode, Steve?
The subject for today is 2002's black comedy, Death to Smoochy.
Very excited about this one for several reasons, which I'll go into, but let's start. You lead the way.
Very good. Well, I figured I would start, as we did with a couple previous episodes, with giving a little plot synopsis, and then we will chat about the movie in detail. In keeping with the theme that we have started, I am going to read you the description from the back of the VHS box, which is very brief. Kids love him. TV execs adore him. Sheesh, it's enough to make out-of-work kiddie show host Rainbow Randolph puke purple. Ever since that plush, fuchsia-hued, platitude-spouting Smoochy the Rhino started jiggy-ziggy dancing in Randolph's time slot, he has just one mad goal: turn the rhino into a dead duck. Now, that leaves out a whole bunch, because we've got the Irish mob involved, corrupt charities involved, and then we've got the dark backroom dealings of children's TV. When we spoke briefly about this, you said that you had seen this movie many times. In fact, I think you said you may have owned it at one point. How did that come about? What has been your prior experience?
So there are holes in my memory about how I came across Death to Smoochy. This was early 2000s when we were all buying a lot more DVDs and somehow watched this film, really enjoyed it at the time, and just bought it and just watched it a lot. I will say I had forgotten a great deal of it. Now, to be fair, it's probably been about 20 years, so that's my excuse for not remembering giant pieces of the plot. When I did see it, I saw it often because I thought it was hilarious at the time, and so I kept watching it.
I, too, have not seen this movie in at least 20 years. I remember when it originally came out, I remember seeing the commercials for it, and the cast was impressive. The premise was impressive. I was really looking forward to it. Fairly certain that my friends and I watched it at home. We rented it. We didn't see it in theaters or anything like that. And I vaguely remember liking it at the time, but couldn't tell you anything about it beyond the, oh yeah, we watched it, we enjoyed it, and then it was gone from my memory. Like you, I had forgotten most of it. I remembered a couple little things here and there. This viewing was very much like watching it for the first time, which I think added to the experience because there are a couple of marvelous jokes that are presented in a way to shock you.
For sure.
And it worked marvelously. So before we get into our discussion of the movie itself, let's just chat a brief bit about who is in it. The cast was one of the draws of this film because as Rainbow Randolph, we have Robin Williams. And Robin Williams in a role that you wouldn't really expect from him when you think Robin Williams. In terms of his filmography, 2002 was what I'm calling his evil year, because this was the year that Insomnia came out, Death to Smoochy, and 1 Hour Photo. So he went from playing the lovable manic type to, oh yes, Evil, which was fun.
And this one, it's like a little bit of both, right?
A little
'Cause
bit,
It's
yeah.
not as dark as 1 Hour Photo, but it is darker. It's funny dark.
As Smoochy, Mr. Sheldon Mopes. The names in this film are fantastic. We have Golden Globe and SAG Award winner Edward Norton. Very young Edward Norton. This was relatively early in his career. I think he'd done maybe 7 or 8 movies prior to this. We have Danny DeVito. He plays the agent Burke Burnett, who is the sleazy, skim some money off the top, backdoor dealings agent. And he also directed the film, which we'll chat about that in just a little bit. Rounding out the main characters, if you will, we have Catherine Keener playing Nora Wells. You might remember her from being John Malkovich or The 40-Year-Old Virgin. More recently, she voiced the villain in The Incredibles 2. And then we have a fun collection of actors playing smaller roles, such as a young Jon Stewart
With a terrible haircut.
playing Marion Frank Stokes, one of the TV execs in charge of children's programming. We have Pam Ferris playing the Irish gangster Tommy Cotter. She looked familiar, and I could not place her when I watched the movie, but having gone and looked through the filmography, she's worked with Danny DeVito prior to this. She was in Matilda, playing Miss Trunchbull. And then, if you are a Harry Potter fan, if you remember Aunt Marge, the one who Harry accidentally inflates and she floats off into the sky, that was also her. We've got Michael Rispoli playing Spinner, retired boxer who is suffering from the brain damage inflicted from his former profession. Harvey Fierstein as Marv Green, the head of the corrupt children's charity.
A Parade of Hope Foundation, I believe it's called.
Vincent Schiavelli, whom I love seeing anytime he pops up. He plays Buggy Ding Dong, a former children's show host, now heroin addict and assassin, apparently. Now, was his falling asleep narcolepsy, or was that a side effect of the heroin?
Oh, no, it was heroin. They were making a point to show that he was absolutely high.
The last person I'd like to mention is Danny Woodburn, who plays Angelo Pike, one of the little people who plays the head Rhinette and is a friend to Rainbow Randolph and actually takes him in and shows him some pity during the course of the movie. The entire movie was written by Adam Resnick. He was a writer who wrote for David Letterman and The Larry Sanders Show, which is a plus. But he's also responsible for movies such as Cabin Boy. Do you remember Cabin Boy?
Vaguely and not in a good way.
Then you remember it properly. So he wrote it in late 2000, and then Danny DeVito directed and shot the movie in 2001. Now, I had forgotten that Danny DeVito actually has a decent number of directing credits under his belt. I remembered Matilda, and I remembered this, but then I had forgotten about Throw Mama from the Train.
Did you do War of the Roses?
He did War of the Roses, yes.
Yeah.
Matilda was the one that he directed prior to this, and there were a number of projects that he was slated to direct in the intervening years between 1996 and 2002, but things kept getting sidetracked, pushed back, etc. And so after a bit of a hiatus, this was what he came back with. The last person I'd like to mention, for now at least, is Anastas Mikos, who was the cinematographer. And I mention his name because the cinematography makes some choices in this film. Some of them work very well, others I don't think quite as highly of. This movie started pace-wise much faster than I remembered it. I thought we had a decent amount of time with Rainbow Randolph being the star of the show before something happened. And no, it's within like the first 5 minutes, he's out.
They do the intro with Rainbow Randolph's TV show. It's a song with him dancing and singing with children, which is wonderful. I will say I love the music in this film. I think all the songs are great. They're catchy. They're hilarious. By the time the song is over, they cut to him at a restaurant meeting with some parents who have a suitcase full of money. He's like drinking scotch or something. And the line that is said is, "So you'll make sure my boy dances up front." And he says something disparaging to them and he starts to walk away and they pull out guns and yell FBI.
Half of the people in the restaurant pull out guns.
I thought there was more of a lead-in to when we got to Smoochy. There isn't. There is one great scene between Jon Stewart and Catherine Keener where he's listing off all the different kids show hosts. It's like, oh no, that one got deported. Oh no, that one got convicted. Just one after another after the other, where they're trying to find a new host who doesn't have a horrible background.
In the scene immediately prior to this, which I loved because of the way it was shot, Jon Stewart's character is instructed to find someone who is quote-unquote squeaky clean. And the cinematography jumped out to me in that meeting, because the way it is shot, we've got the board of directors sitting behind this desk, but they're shot from low, so they seem massive. And Jon Stewart is always shot from above looking up, and he seems minuscule. Even when they do a split shot where we've got Stewart on one side and the directors on the other, they're huge. He's little.
I actually think that the cinematography is part of the comedy.
Oh, yes,
I really
absolutely.
There were some really creative choices in this, and I think it's funny. It's amusingly shot. And of course, the introduction of Smoochy, right? Because one of the things she says is like, have we gone so low that we're going to go with Smoochy?
Yeah.
Right? Where is he? It's like, I don't know. He's been doing like birthday parties and stuff. And then she calls him, and his voicemail says, I'll be doing this show or whatever, or you can see me at my regular gig at the Coney Island Methadone Clinic.
Yes.
Which is great and leads to yet another song. Oh, we'll get you off that smack. Oh, yes, we can.
And he's pointing to people in the waiting room, calling them by name.
You know what I'm talking about. Yep.
Yeah.
The smack can lead to crack is part of the other lyrics. Amazing. One thing that I love about this film is Ed Norton. He portrays innocence in such a magical way.
So well.
And I had forgotten about that. One of the things I loved about when I first had my time with this movie was that Edward Norton comes off as pure wholesome. His kindness, his kind of just magical, almost Disney caricature of a human. What I love about the writing in this film is that even though we have that, and he is earnest, and gosh, Edward Norton just sells it. There is a passing line later when he's connecting with Catherine Keener, and they're talking about Ricketts the hippo, which in and of itself is hilarious. And then he talks about how he got ordered to take this anger management class in college, and that's how he discovered Ricketts. I also remember that at the very beginning when he took her out to go eat hot dogs, he'd gotten the owner of this hot dog place to do like non-meat hot dogs.
Yeah.
And then he squirted green stuff on his hot dog, which he said was a mixture of spirulina and almond butter.
It looks horrible.
So anyway, I can go on and on about Edward Norton in this role because I think he's fantastic.
He is absolutely amazing.
What I love about this entire concept is this magical children's entertainment being a seedy, horrible, everyone's corrupt. The network that is creating this entertainment, KidNet, they're just trying to make money off of everything. The moment Smoochy starts, they have like Smoochy cereal, Smoochy soda, Smoochy everything. And of course, Rainbow Randolph was corrupt himself. Executives are corrupt. The charities are corrupt. This is a dark business, which is funny because you actually have the Irish mob and you can barely tell the difference between the Irish mob and the people doing children's television.
Yes.
And charities. I don't want to de-emphasize Rainbow Randolph because throughout the course of the film, he is slowly losing his mind, becoming more and more obsessed with the fact that Smoochy has taken his time slot, has taken his whole life, essentially, while he's been kicked to the curb.
Yeah.
And so we see him just slowly lose it as the film goes on and gets more ridiculous and more intense and amazing. So his performance is great. Danny DeVito is fantastic in this as well.
Yes.
And honestly, Catherine Keener is wonderful. She starts out completely jaded. She's been doing this for clearly many years now and working with these people in this corrupt environment. So when Smoochy comes in, she doesn't buy it. She's like, you're as corrupt as everyone else. And it's nice to see her kind of transformation throughout the course of the film.
There was one part of her arc that kind of bugged me, and that was best exemplified in the scene where she goes to Smoochy's dressing room to chat with him about something, and Edward Norton takes off his shirt, and she just goes, ooh. I was loving the whole, I am jaded, I don't care about this anymore, but then in watching Smoochy's performance, she goes, oh, okay, no, the smile starts creeping back onto her face. I loved that aspect of it. The whole, Oh, wait. Yeah, no, he's sexy too. Could have done without.
We didn't need it, I guess we could say.
No.
You could have edited that little bit out, but they were trying to build the tension, clearly, and they had to show that she had some interest in him.
Yes.
You know, maybe just a little sprinkle, right?
Okay.
Jeez.
To say, though, their first, I don't want to call it a sex scene because you don't see anything, but their first sex scene, very well shot with the 3-panel divider. His head is on one panel, she's on the other panel, and you never get to see really what goes on in that middle, except for some shadows of him taking off the shoes or something like that.
The bottom half of his costume is still on.
Yes.
So she takes off his giant rhino feet and then his rhino legs, which is, again, visually hilarious. And it's their only sex scene, by the way. They just have one. I just love him. Everything that comes out of Smoochy's mouth. He's like, do you know how many songs I have? I have like 300 songs, from the deliciousness of vegetables to the importance of donating plasma. It's like, what?
My favorite song, what's the proper title of it? My stepdad's not mean, he's just adjusting.
3 cheers for the man I call Stan.
Yes.
Which is great because it's this wonderful song of acceptance. But at the end, he goes, now, if he hurts you or your mom in any way, what's the number that we call? And the kids go, 911. Right. Wonderfully intense. There's a couple of bits that I have problems with this film.
Okay.
And I had problems with it when I first watched it too.
All right.
And I had forgotten about it until I watched it. And I was like, oh. And that is our boxer.
Yeah.
Wonderfully acted. I'm not
Very
going
well
to diss
acted.
that. The whole concept is he was a very famous boxer. Everybody knows his name. He is clearly had some damage.
A few too many blows to the head.
It's just a hard sell for me, that character. It's the only part of the movie that I don't love.
Okay.
Like, I do like what they did with the character, that he was very loving and he was very caring, and Smoochy was so sweet to him. And his sister, who's the head of the Irish mob, she's very protective of him, and she gets him on the Smoochy show because he loves Smoochy so much. He's necessary for later with the way the plot goes, but the beginning parts are just like, no, this is not right. Like, there's no way to... Folks, TBIs are not funny. Brain damage is not funny. That's my only big complaint. The rest of it was fine because it was about horrible people doing horrible things. I'm down with that. We can go down that dark alley. I have no issue with that. But don't bring this kind of character into it. I do love the character of Tommy, our Irish mob boss.
Yes.
She is hilarious. I remembered one particular scene, one line.
Okay.
Two lines. She has henchmen, which are great because at the beginning, of course, they're very scary. And by the end of the movie, Smoochy's on a first name basis with them.
They're buddies.
They're pals. They're all pals. And they're very sweet to him, to Sheldon. Sorry, I keep calling him Smoochy because that's what he is, but his name is Sheldon. Yeah. When they first come to him and they say, you're an executive producer now. We want you to put Spinner on the show. And he goes, I don't know if I can do that. TV is very complex. And she goes and she sits down.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh, boys, I'm sad, boys. And you see this henchman who's like, who made you sad, Tommy? It's like, I'd rather not say. Hilarious. Later on, there's a scene where they go after Rainbow Randolph.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, Roy, do you have the hammer? And he goes, I always have the hammer, Tommy. And he pulls out this hammer. It's great. One of my favorite things in this movie, which is just awful, let me just say that right now, is that Spinner has one role in the show. He's playing Moochie, Smoochy's cousin, who is in an almost identical outfit with a change in color. The sex scene that we talked about coincides with his death.
Yeah. Because,
of course, the charity people, he's trying to throw an event that is not going to make money for them. He's going to do it for the methadone clinic, and he's going to give away snacks, and they're all going to be healthy. There's no vendors. And of course, the charity people are like, take him out. And so they send goons to take out Smoochy. But who they actually grab is Moochie. He fights back, and then eventually they shoot him and murder him, and they dump his body in an alley in the costume. Two things that I love about this death scene. One, the chalk outline.
The chalk outline.
Right?
Yes.
they pin it on Rainbow Randolph because Rainbow Randolph's been trying to go after Smoochy this entire time. But Tommy and her gang do their own research, and they talk to like the coroner, who I think is a family member or related. And he goes, if you look at how the body is laid out, it's done in a specific way. That is actually the Parade of Hope. That's like their tag.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're just like, what? Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
This also led to one of my favorite lines from Harvey Fierstein's character. Smoochy's fuchsia. Moochie was burgundy.
When he's yelling at his henchmen why they messed up. It's like, what? They look the same. The other thing that I have to say that I do love is that right before this murder happens, Moochie is running around backstage singing Pop Goes the Weasel. It's just, it's great. The writing is good and dark and funny. I have to say, I did remember this happening, but I forgot how it came to be. Rainbow Randolph calls Sheldon and talks to him about this event for children or whatever. And then he shows up in a costume as his driver with I think an Australian accent.
Not a very elaborate costume. He's just got like my goatee and that's it.
That's right. Yeah, it's true.
And yet somehow that's enough for Sheldon not to recognize him. This is another scene that I absolutely love the cinematography on, because for most of it, we just see Robin Williams' face because he's in the driver's seat. Edward Norton is sitting immediately behind him in the back seat. And so it's just his head. Occasionally, it's just a very close-up of his eye. And then every now and then, Edward Norton's head just sticks out from behind, very small in comparison, makes a couple quips, and then sits back up so he's once again hidden behind the ever-increasingly angrier face of Rainbow Randolph as he takes him to what is supposed to be the kids' charity event.
A kids' charity event in this huge building.
That type of building is actually used to store salt for salting the roads in winter. I recognize that from my days up near Chicago. Anyway, sorry, I digress.
That's all right. So Sheldon puts on his Smoochy outfit, has his guitar. He goes on stage, and the lights are just overpowering him. You can't see anything. And he starts to sing, and then he's like, hey, can we like turn down the lights and bring up the house lights so it's hard for me to sing to my friends when I can't see my friends.
Right.
And then they do. And it's not a children's charity kids event at all. It's a Nazi rally. And they all cheer Smoochy and start yelling, Hail Smoochy, as these giant Nazi flags fall behind him. And of course, cameras are going off as he is slowly panicking at where he is.
This joke is, I think, my favorite just because you're not expecting it. I knew there was some sort of setup. I just could not remember what it was. And it's like, Nazis. Like, oh, hell. Oh, and they're saluting and chanting. Great. Oh, now we've got the banner behind me. Fantastic. Oh, police raid. It just keeps escalating and escalating. Oh, that was wonderful.
I love the ice show. Smoochy on Ice. So they make a joke about this in the film. The charities are all about the ice shows because they make so much money, right? They make money for the vendors, snacks, everything. And of course, at first, Smoochy is against it. Like we said, at some point he decides he's going to do his own version of it, but it's not going to make any money for anybody.
This is one of the things that I did like about Sheldon's character arc throughout the film, because he's taken the tools that people have been telling him, oh, you need to assert more power. You're the star. You're the famous one. People come to see you. Wield that a little bit. And then when he does, they're all left going, no, not like that.
So it leads to the kind of climax of the movie where everyone's at Smoochy on Ice. I forgot that the show is insanely dramatic because it starts out fun and cuddly or whatever. And then this opera singer comes out and starts singing this song. Beautiful song.
An angel descends from the rafters above and crowns Smoochy.
Then Smoochy's being chased by demons, and then he's being chased by people holding Nazi flags. So it's almost like we're going on the journey that Smoochy has been on.
Yep.
He is running through what I guess was Chinatown, and then he stops. The dramatic music is going, and in the distance, on the ground, is Smoochy dead. And him weeping over Smoochy. And it's really intense and really dramatic. And then at some point, we actually see Smoochy go to heaven.
Yes.
This is so insane and so good.
The highlight of that was the shots back to the crowd, where you have the majority of the audience is children. And they are cheering Smoochy on. They are sad when Moochie dies. It's a brilliant subversion of expectations because have you been to an ice show of any kind?
No.
I have, I think, once or twice. And they are lighthearted, fun, silly, etc. So to suddenly get this dramatic retelling of everything that we've seen so far, complete with opera singer and murder scene and ascending a stairway to heaven, turning and waving at the gates.
And everyone's waving.
Everyone's waving back. It's brilliant.
Bucky Ding Dong is in the rafters with a rifle, high as can be, trying to shoot Smoochy because he's been promised Smoochy's spot on television. He's another disgraced kid show person. He eventually dies, falls from the rafters and dies on the ice after taking a shot at Smoochy and barely missing his head. Gets his horn, I think.
Yeah, the horn in the ear, I think.
Yes. This is right at the time that Moochie's going to heaven, by the way. He dies on the ice. Harvey Fierstein, we are told, has had his head cut off. This is dark stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And we get to the end where, of course, Smoochy is chasing after Danny DeVito's character and corners him. And there's a struggle and there's a gun. And what I loved was that you start seeing Sheldon losing it. He is losing it. And then out of nowhere, here comes Tommy, who tells him, no, you're like a good person. Don't become them.
We'll take care of it.
It's so dark, even in that, right? Because it's like, okay, you guys go. It's all good. And they grab Jon Stewart and Danny DeVito. Have you two ever traveled together? And that's the last we hear about them.
Yep.
It's just so wild. The contrast of the violence and the darkness with the kid stuff. It's amazing. My question to you is this, though.
Yeah.
Was this movie a success?
So I'm guessing from what you have said so far that you liked this movie. As much now as you did then, or more so, or about the same?
I would say about the same because I feel like I have the same objections and the same love that I did before. I think it is a very smart film. It's creative. The writing is really good. I dislike the Spinner character, but if you take that out, I love everything else. I think it is ridiculous at times in the best way possible. The alchemy that they created is very original. I can't remember a film like it in that way.
No, I can't think of another one that does this quite like this one does.
I also wonder, and the reason I ask you, did people like this, was because this movie works for me, but I don't know if it works for everybody. But I actually forgot to ask you, what did you think about this film watching it again?
I really enjoyed it. I was laughing out loud throughout at all of the different jokes and just the strange dark humor, which, as you say, you have to be a fan of strange and dark humor in order to enjoy this movie.
You can tell moments where it definitely feels like Robin Williams is improvising and they let him do it, like the penis cookies scene. Where he comes in and he goes, no, it's a penis. And he starts naming every kind of different word for penis. That is such a Robin Williams thing to do. You just know they just let him go. When he's on the phone with him and he starts yelling that he's coming for him, that he's going on safari, and then he does the elephant sound, I cry every time I hear that.
I'm just curious because this scene just popped back into my mind. What did you think about his attempt at self-immolation in what is supposed to be Times Square?
Folks, there's a scene where he's speaking to a crowd and he throws gasoline all over himself and he's blaming Smoochy for it and he lights a match, but he's also terrified. And then this little girl comes out and he goes, Rainbow Randolph, what are you doing? And then she blows out the match. It's so bizarre. And then 2 seconds later, Smoochy comes out of the building. So everyone runs to Smoochy, including the little girl. And he's just left there doused in gasoline.
I still am trying to figure out how I feel about that scene. I think that is probably the most bizarre. Everything else works in some way. That one's kind of weird.
You think, oh, is he turning a corner? But he's not.
No.
He goes back to hating Smoochy 5 seconds later.
He does that like 3 or 4 times throughout the entire movie. To get to your question about how did people feel about this? I would like to start with a couple of quotes from the critics. We're going to start with David Sterrett, who wrote for the Christian Science Monitor, because he said that this was a razor-sharp satire and the most refreshingly outrageous movie of the season. Now I'd like to turn to our friend Roger Ebert.
Oh boy.
Only enormously talented people could have made Death to Smoochy. Those with lesser gifts would have lacked the nerve to make a film so bad, so miscalculated, so lacking any connection with any possible audience. To make a film this awful, you have to have enormous ambition and confidence and dream big dreams.
Burn.
The movie cost about $50 million to make.
Okay.
And the box office brought in 8.3.
No way.
It bombed.
I think I knew that it had not been a success, but I didn't know how poorly.
How badly it had done.
Yeah, like how,
Yeah.
what level of bad. Because again, right, who are you marketing this to? Other than me and you. People who like comedies, people who like dark comedies, absolutely. But it is a weird mix. Who wants to see Dark Barney?
That was actually what another critic said, that it was attempting to play on parents' annoyance with Barney and a death to Barney movement, if you will, but it came too late to capitalize on that. It was a little late for that connection to be as strong as it might otherwise have been.
There was a redemption moment after the Nazi rally where Tommy finds Rainbow Randolph and forces him to confess that he set this whole thing up.
Yes.
Smoochy is vindicated. He's allowed to come back to the show. And there is this scene where he's doing this kind of fireside talk with the children. And he starts talking about being, when you get really angry and you're just full with all this anger about everything that's happened. And it's getting dark. And then he goes, yeah. And then you know what I do with that? What I do with that anger? When I feel like I want to hit somebody.
And you get shots of the cast, including Nora, who's looking concerned and leaning in like, where's he going with this?
And then he tells them that he howls. And they have this great scene where they all start howling. And it's actually kind of sweet.
It is.
Except at the very end of it.
He's still got this crazed look in his eye.
Then he just brings the microphone up and he goes, yeah, I feel a lot better. That was good. And then there's this sort of long pause with crazy eyes. And then he goes, do you guys want to do the little dance? And then everybody starts dancing. And I'm like, whoa. Which again, there's always this hint of like, there's this darkness to Sheldon that he keeps tamped down. And I love that. Okay, so financial failure.
Yes.
Some critics liked it. A lot of critics didn't.
Most critics did not. The Christian Science Monitor was really the only positive one that I could find.
Is this one of those films that became bigger as time went on? Did people fall in love with this later, like Legend?
I don't think it is at that level, though I have seen a number of people put out articles and videos explaining that this is actually a really good movie, a bit of a sleeper that no one has seen because of mismarketing, poor performance, and therefore it got forgotten for a while, but is definitely worth you going back now and rewatching. So I don't think it's quite gotten to cult classic status yet. It does have its fans, though.
Well, I didn't expect it to be this big of a failure because it is good. I'm sorry, like I stand by it. It is good. Yes, the Spinner character is a real big problem for me, but the rest of it, it's amazing. Does it hold up, you think?
I think I've said this about at least 2 or 3 of the films that we've spoken about, and that is, if this is your type of film, if you like dark comedy, then yeah, this is absolutely phenomenal and well worth a watch. If that's not your thing, though, I don't think you're going to like this.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of people who are like, this was okay. I really think this is the kind of film where it's like, you love it or you hate it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there you go, folks. That is Death to Smoochy. What a fun trip that was.
So, as that was my choice, I pass the baton back to you, sir. What is it we're going to watch for our next episode?
Well, I'm going to take us right back to the mid-90s again. We are going to go back to 1995, and we're going to join Sylvester Stallone and Antonio Banderas in the 1995 film Assassins. And did I mention Julianne Moore?
You didn't.
I know, I forgot. Julianne Moore is also on the cast. And I have a personal connection to this film, which I will explain when we do the episode.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us. Thank you so much for subscribing if you have subscribed. If not, go ahead and do it. Do it right now. We'll wait. Join us next time for Assassins.
Sit back, it's time to get groovy. Question, do you remember that movie?